absolutely. But there are factors and principalities that want to control the planet, and they want to depopulate it. And they want to make certain that it becomes again a genetic laboratory for them and a resource center. Who has a question now?
Eddie?
Eddie,
Yes.
welcome.
Thank you. I want to know about what toxic things for the brain of children. Why are we having so many children now with autism and other cognitive and brain
All right.
function?
Every once in a while, there's so many children with cognitive brain problems, autism, and the full spectrum of this. It sort of is about the same issue at the other end. If you look at the aged people, and their problem is what? Alzheimer's. And what is Alzheimer's? It is a form of dementia, and a person loses their noodles, so to speak, and they have difficulty remembering and functioning. And the good Alzheimer people are happy sometimes. They have happy dementia. But basically, the spectrum is between the Alzheimer dementia people and the young children coming in with their issues. Is it, if we step back and look at it, what it says is it's really hard to get born on Earth into a healthy body. And it's really difficult to leave Earth with your brain intact. Something's going on here. You can't get in cleanly and you can't get out cleanly anymore. You follow this?
Oh, what does that mean?
All right. So what does that boil down to? It boils down to, as you said, Eddie, toxicities. What is toxicity? You can be toxic to yourself by carrying around wounds from lines of time, old resentments, fears. So that is sort of emotional toxicity. And lots of people suffer from emotional toxicity. Then there is the fear in society. And so the fear in society says you'd better be afraid of your body. You can't trust it. It will do unpredictable things, and you can die. Ooh, suddenly everyone says, I can't trust this thing that I'm in. Follow this? These are programs. Then you have what would be called pregnant mothers in the most delicate, gentle stages of their being, motherhood. One of the most sacred states there is. Because without mothers carrying you, and without fathers, let's say, offering the seed, there's no getting in. And the globalists want, some of the Anunnakis want to change the entry process. That's what they've been working on. Because they want to breed the humanity out of you. And the global elites want to break down the family. So why do young children have these issues? Number one, it is important to understand that souls incarnate into groups, and you call them generations. Astrologically, one could say those generations, well, let's say statistically, those generations are considered to be about 22 years. That's the average for a generation. Between 20 and 25, but 22. And what's interesting is that one age is about 2,200 years, and you would get 100 generations in 2,200 years. A little bit of interesting math there. So you have a generation, a few of them now coming in. And what they were born into is the wireless or the electronic games. You follow this? And not necessarily wireless, but batteries. And what was happening is it was all around you, and too much data was coming in. The brain, the eyes couldn't take it in. And they began to, let's say, disrupt the signals along the nervous system. And it disrupts the stage of development. And so many unwitting mothers subjected themselves not just to, lots of people want to say, oh, it's the shots, it's the inoculations. Well, that certainly adds to it, and some children appear to be quite vital and quite present, and then they get these highly toxic cocktails within a few months or weeks of their life, and then you're poisoning them. Do you understand? And society says, no, you can't come to school if you don't take these poisons. And now with Obamacare, here's the new story with Obamacare, is it A doctor is not allowed to treat you if you do not have vaccinations for your children.
Oh my God, are you serious?
That's part of Obamacare.
No way.
So right now, doctors are having to tell their patients that they've been treating out of the kindness of their heart. And let's say the parent says, my children don't have vaccinations. No problem, the doctor says. Now the doctor's quietly telling people, I'm sorry, you're going to have to find another doctor. I can't treat you any longer. Well, there's no doctors that will treat them. They can't if they want to be under Obamacare. What does all this signal? What does it signal? That you are such powerful beings. You are so vital. The beings have to go to all these extensive, elaborate contrivances to make you sick and control you. And your children have taken this on as a soul. As a soul comes in and says, all right, I'll be one of these special needs children. Why? So that the rest of society will wake up to what's going on. You with us, Evie?
Yes.
So, how do you protect these children? If you are a mother, and we know there's not too many pregnant women in this room, but if you are a mother, and you may be able to tell a mother this, but often a mother's in a very delicate state. She doesn't want to know. But a pregnant woman must protect herself. It is her most vulnerable time. And you are building a being. And the being that you are going to build is going to love you or hate you, or both. And if you build a being that's not healthy, you either give that being away, or you have to take care of that being for the rest of your life. When normal motherhood is you bring a healthy being in, you have them for about 20 years, and then you say, all right, fly. You understand? But so many of these kids can't fly, and they will never fly. And they're a joy to be around sometimes, because everyone who has to deal with these special needs children has to open their heart chakra. So there's many facets and many purposes to it. But it must be understood that in today's world, a pregnant mother who's carrying cell phones, who's sitting in front of television or going to movies and watching violent movies, and having wireless signals all around, and smartphones, and every doodad, and the house is all electric, and this and this and this. All of this is bombarding the fetus. It cannot survive it. Do you understand? It's not a nourishing environment. And so you are going to see a lot of illness over the next number of years. You're going to see a big, huge wake-up of people are going to start realizing we can't do this to ourselves. We can't do this to our children and our grandchildren anymore. It's not just the national debt. It's the environment that we are bringing them into. And so many parents think the more I give my child, the better parent I am. Doesn't work that way. It's a very sad story. It's a story that is soul-searing, that out of love, parents create these problem children, and that society, they're a drain on society. Do you understand? They are symbolic of a weakening of your species, a weakening of the DNA, while at the same time, you have many beings strengthening the DNA. Look at the people who live the most natural, and the cultures who live the most natural. They are going to be the healthiest ones. Who has a question, please?
Bruce, can you explain?
Who is it?
Bruce.
Bruce, welcome.
Thank you. Can you explain the process that causes the soul to forget who they are before entering the physical body?
He wants to know the process of what causes the soul to forget who they are. Well, quite simply, we would say that there are a number of factions. Because of genetic tinkering, long ago, certain things were shut down. We've given the story of 12 strands of DNA and that you have 2, and we sort of retract that a little bit. Not that it's not true, but too many people start offering you 12 strands of DNA for $99 or $999, and that's not the scoop, do you understand? As a product of genetic engineering, Earth is a living library. And the story we are looking at is about 500,000 years old. Your scientific say Earth is, 4.5 billion. Well, they are wrong, but we'll go with that number, sort of. So, do you know how many 500,000 years fit in 5 billion? a lot. Meaning a lot of visitations, a lot of civilizations rising and falling with nothing left. A lot of things have been found in undisturbed rock strata that's millions and millions of years old. Are artifacts that are construed and designed, obviously, by intelligence. So, you are ancient species. And the recent product of yourselves is hampered in some of your abilities because of genetic tampering that was part of the entirety of the program. Other parts of it have to do with soul memory and the evolution of your beliefs. In other words, when you come onto the earth plane and you incarnate here, you incarnate simultaneously. You think you incarnate in a linear fashion. So you may be sitting here in 2013 and say, well, you know, I know I was on the planet 100,000 years ago. And I know I was around 2,000 years ago. And from this perspective, you act as if that's long gone. But the way it is that those lives, if those are your lives, they are concurrent to this now. This now is isolated to some extent in its memory. As you say, why does the soul forget? Well, again, genetic tampering, but also there's a certain isolation that the soul needs as a process of development, so that there's this learning that takes place. If you were to be bombarded with all this other information, it would affect the developmental stages of consciousness. It is like an archaeologist or an anthropologist going to visit a untouched culture, and as soon as they pull out a Coke bottle, or they pull out a barrette, or a rubber band, there's the culture. It's changed. Do you understand? And so sometimes to develop in ignorance without certain knowledge of the other lines of time is a victory for the soul to learn and to grow. Now, can you grow in the physical body to know the soul's as you begin to question and wonder and become more spiritual? You do remember what the soul story is. You can use regressions to remember it. Some people throughout time have used substances in the living library to alter their consciousness, and they become in contact with the soul's journey, other levels of dimensions and such. So does that help you understand things, Bruce? A little bit. What more do you want to know?
Well, I understand the reason, which is kind of what 90% of what you said is
the reason.
That. I understand.
So how to open it? You want to open it?
But no, I want to know how it actually does it.
See, it's a P. He's not satisfied. No, that's the P question. P says, well, can you just put it A, B, C, D, E, F, D, and then I will get it. And that's a part of the mind that no offense to you, but it doesn't know how to quiet itself. And it cannot accept an answer unless it meets that kind of criterion. And the mind was developed in this fashion over time so that you could deal with precision. But what it's done is hampered you in understanding. There is not a precise, let's say, technique A, B, C, D, E, F, G, because it's different for all people. You follow this? And so when the soul comes in, you are dealing with, let's say there's a bridge of knowledge when you are in the womb. So let's say that the soul is hovering in and out of the body that's being built. It sort of is in, and then it's connected with what you might call your higher self, your oversoul. And then in order to really seal it off, there's a bit of forgetfulness. And yet all children, most children, are relatively cognizant of other lines of time and a bit more mystical aspect of their nature up until about 7 years old. And at 7 years old, Saturn moves in 7-year cycles. It takes 29 years to move around the zodiac, but every 7 years it sort of puts you through an initiation. So by 7, most of you We're sort of removed from the mystical remembering. But yet, perhaps at 3 or 4, children are commonly say to their mother, you know, I was the mommy before. And so there is soul memory up to a point. And then, let's say, you're forgetful, certainly from 7 at least until 21, 28, let us say. From our point of view, you move into the maturation of adulthood in the physical body at about 28 years old. Saturn moves all the way around. Then you may start questioning, or you may start having family. And then you wait till the next Saturn return, 58, and you start questioning if you are spiritually aware. And the stories come through. Bruce, they do. Many people know their soul stories. And why do they know them? They know them because they want to know them. Who else has a question, please?
This is Janet.
Janet, welcome.
We recently passed the nanosecond.
Yes, the nano's over.
Yes. And so now we're moving into another phase.
We call this the new era.
All right. I would appreciate the comments on the opportunity that the new era represents for our development of human consciousness, and specifically how we can evolve during the process of weather wars and wars here in the United States, things that we will specifically move through in the next couple, 3 years.
Yes.
And what this era represents, if you could.
So the new era is predicated on, in your version that you are in, a flowering of consciousness. And let's say the new era began right after the nano ended. So December 22nd, you are in the new era. Let's see, do the math. Is that 3 months? You're 3 months into the new era. So settle down and recognize it's going to take a while to shape itself. Nonetheless, what is it going to be about? It's going to be about basically a clash between the technology of the mind and consciousness and the ability of people to, not in a military fashion. The military is very interested in developing human psychic warriors, to have you to be able to move objects with your mind and this kind of thing. Oh, there's lots of organizations that train young children to attempt to do this, and they're looking for those who have these rare talents. But as adults, you will see that this development of the mind over a dependence upon technology. That technology, this is what's going to be weighed out in the next number of years. And of course, the technology is growing ever more lethal in its usage, how it's being applied. And so too, understand that as this technology develops, so too are the inner technologies developing in various people. You have not reached critical mass. Critical mass is basically when a certain number of beings operate at a certain frequency, or a certain number of people have built a thought form, and the thought form has so much energy, it transmits the idea, and then suddenly people, it's in the air, they get it, and then they have it. So these next number of years, from 2013 to 2026, 27, we call that the changeover time. And the next, from 2013 to 2017, is going to be very, very intense. These are the real deceleration, slowdown. There's going to be big stuff economically, and you are in the window of possible Earth changes during this particular time because of the Uranus-Pluto squares our vehicle was drawing out for you. You have this radical element, and you have this very solid earth element, and they are fire and earth, and they're going to create a dynamic there. So you have potential for volcanic release, earth changes release. These are high in now through 2017. How do you deal with all this? How do you deal with weather wars, weather control, Earth naturally releasing, the astrological influences dismantling everything? You do everything our vehicle has taught you this morning and what we are encouraging you to do. You ground yourself. You strengthen your auric field. You use the chakras to bring energy in and out. You use intentions, and you do it more and more consciously throughout the day. It's not something you just do once in a while. It's not something that you hear about on the weekends. It becomes your mode of operation. You begin to operate on a bunch of different levels. That is what the new era will require to anchor it in. The change over years will be, again, the first 5 very, very intense. Then from 2017 to 2027, about 2026, 10 years or so, 2018 to 2027, about 10 years there. So there's that phase. And that phase will be a re-examining of what consciousness is and who has consciousness, and really sort of in the United States rewriting a declaration of independence, and then working on what would be called a new constitution for humanity. Granted, your papers, your democracies, all these things, they are noble, but you are dealing with forces that are using machines to take you over, to wipe out democracy, to create a belittling of you, a limiting of you. Don't fight the system, and you can't argue with entities. It does you no good. But what does do you good is you have the power. You have the choice of how you feel and how you think, and no one can take your imagination away from you unless they tie you to a television. Do you understand? And they force you to look at pictures. And they force your eyeballs open with toothpicks. That's what they do in psychic driving. And so all of this will assist in, this is what you must do. You must utilize your physical body, each of you, and you must come to the understanding and accept yourself for what and who you are, and know that your loving acceptance of yourself makes yourself fertilize and grow. And so you can't look to someone else to say, oh, you are so great, come on, come on. Support and encouragement are wonderful. But part of the way the body works and what clicks the body on is that if you as a spirit love the body that you have created, and that you work with that body on an energetic level to bring it to its highest frequency. This is your path, this is your destiny, this is your inevitable challenge, and this is the legacy of the new era. And the machines, the toxicities, the more people wake up, the more psychic they get. You will have to deal with these beings and diminish them. You will not destroy them. Higher consciousness understands that these are lost beings, and they are lost from the truth, but they push you to awaken to the truth because of their shadow that wants to overtake you. So without them, you'd be lazy. Do you understand this? In the end, you will thank them, because it is part of the dynamic force of the multiverse. And if you forget everything else, remember this: you are powerful beings in the multiverse. Its prime quality is goodness. Its goodness is so good that it allows darkness and evil and these things to work themselves out, to discover they too can find goodness. So how about taking about a 20-minute recess, 15 minutes, some such, come back, and we'll be speaking to you again more on this subject.